Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Going Mental. I'm Paul Elam, sitting here in my huge library full of cheap books, ready to talk to you about the Fearsome Foursome. But first, let me introduce the wonderful and talented Dr. Tara Palmatier, coming to you from her fireplace.
Hi, everyone.
That looks like a real fire, Tara. Is that like a gas get up, or like are you really murdering trees in there?
I'm deforesting like a maniac.
Oh man, it's global warming, folks. We found the problem right here, and its color is ginger. Anyway, let's talk about. We're talking the name of this program tonight is what makes a borderline tick, tick, tick,
Kaboom.
kaboom, which happens with that particular type of individual a lot. So Dr. T, what are the fearsome foursome in our identifiers for a borderline personality?
Sure, and I also apply this to narcissistic personality disorder, sociopathy, histrionic personality disorder, all the cluster B disorders. The fearsome foursome are victim identity, entitlement, control freakery, and emotional reasoning. Sort of
okay. Well, okay, I was going to say let's those are the big four. Let's start with the first one.
Sure.
What was that again?
Victim identity.
Victim identity. Now, I guess a lot of people would have things come to their mind about that. I mean, there's certainly a bunch of that culturally in terms of victim politics and feminism. It gives us a great example of a cultural movement apparently toward victim identity. But how does this play out on the individual level with personality disorders?
Well, to the victim go the spoils. And victims, professional victims at least, can wield a lot of interpersonal power. They can't be wrong because they're victims. They're the injured party. They are the wronged party. Therefore, people need to, particularly their close loved ones, need to tiptoe around them and be unconditionally forgiving and loving of any abuse they happen to perpetrate. It also feeds into their sense of specialness, which we'll get to with entitlement. But I see these four, the fearsome foursome, they all feed into one another. But basically, I see a professional victim identity as a way to forever abdicate any sense of personal responsibility or accountability.
Now, so let's see if we can put that in a nutshell. Is it fair to say that a victim identity would be something along the lines of if you perceive somebody as somebody that's distraught, constantly in need of help, constantly being wronged, and whatever lashing out they're doing is probably justified because they've been so put upon in life. If that becomes the theme of somebody's life, then what we have is somebody there that's maintaining a victim identity and using it to gain sympathy, support, and often when it is not deserved.
Murder charge, a la Jodi Arias.
Yes, that was Travis, I forget the poor young man's last name that had the misfortune to meet her. Alexander. Travis Alexander found out the hard way that victim identity often means perpetrator in real life. Is that a fair statement?
I believe so, yes. I see the opposite side of the victim identity is the aggressor. And many people who adopt the professional victim mantle are, in fact, the she-wolves in sheep's clothing, and they are the aggressor, and they mask their aggression as being a victim.
You know, I gotta point out too, as long as the subject of Jodi Arias came up, there was one point in her trial where, if I'm not mistaken, and this almost seems like I almost would have had to do a hit of acid and just imagine this happening. but it
Right.
was actually real. She was
Yeah.
talking about doing T-shirts that were survivor T-shirts for domestic violence in the middle of her murder trial after she had shot somebody in the head a couple of times, stabbed them like 30s in the 30s of times, and cut their throat from ear to ear.
Slit his throat, shot him, stabbed him, and yet she was going to sell survivor T-shirts. I believe she held one up in court. I don't think she wore one. I could be wrong. I've repressed a great many WTF moments from her trial. But yeah, she was going to sell survivor T-shirts and donate the proceeds to women's domestic violence shelters.
Yeah, and we gotta also point out that, I mean, as in this, like this bizarre Arias case, this is actually, when you think about it, not so bizarre, because I can bet, I have never asked you this question, but I can bet I know what your answer will be, because I have encountered tons and tons of men over the years in working with them where they're just flabbergasted that everybody's buying this victim routine, that everybody in the world seems to have turned against them. Their own family members, frequently friendships, everything. Everybody seems to collude with the wounded woman and
Right.
to get behind her. And these guys are just like dumbstruck. How can these people believe this lying scoundrel? They're just taking on everything she said with no proof. These people are very skilled at manipulating a lot of support, aren't they?
They're great at it, and not just the female borderlines and narcissists, but the male borderlines and narcissists too. They know how to play on people's sympathies. They know what lies to tell to make people pity them, side with them, and they're often quite masterful at it. And it's only until, if a person is bothering to question things and not just feed into the emotional presentation or talk to other people, that you'll find out that the borderline or the narcissist has in fact told multiple versions of the story, often that become more embellished with each telling about how wronged they have been by this horrible villainous person who actually probably is the person who was really victimized. It doesn't come out until people start to compare notes and connect the dots.
Often when it's too late.
It is.
Sadly enough. Okay, and so we got that down. Part of one of the first of your terrible, I guess, horsemen of the apocalypse, or whatever you want to, fearsome foursome, whatever you want to call it. One of the first things that you look for is somebody that maintains a victim identity. They're always the one that's put upon. They're never the one that's wrong. These are not the kind of people that you hear saying things like, you know, I really looked at my role in that and figured out all the screw-ups I made, and here's what I'm doing to correct them. They're telling you about other people's screw-ups and how they were wounded and how they were wronged. And that leads us to the second, the fearsome foursome, which is
Entitlement.
Entitlement. And it seems like a pretty natural, smooth move from victim to entitled, doesn't it? I've been put upon, therefore people owe me.
You know, I was going to say, I am a victim, therefore I am entitled to special privileges, to exemptions, to special treatment, to special.
I can even sell T-shirts from prison after I brutally murdered somebody for nothing more than my petty rage.
Oh, yes, because yeah, well, we're not going to make this into the Jodi Arias show. She does that well enough from her jail cell.
Yeah, she does.
With the warden, please stop giving her internet access, please. But no, it feeds right into the entitlement, and that's about I am special, I deserve special treatment, me first, all about me, all the time.
And this, I'm guessing, is also something you see in your practice a lot. I know that I think you have coined you or somebody like you coined the phrase golden uterus some time ago. And isn't that just another expression of entitlement that comes out of these people?
Well, yes, it's I gave birth, therefore I can never be wrong and all must revere me, because I do what many two-cell organisms
Yeah, we must point out that mitosis is going on at an incalculable number every day. Cells divide, amoebas reproduce, split up, but there's something about the human female in this case that makes them above all other forms of life in their sheer rightness about everything. And what I've seen of that in that sense of entitlement is absolute moral bankruptcy when it comes to how children are treated, how a former partner is treated, how a former partner's wife or girlfriend is treated, how their children are treated. The amount of abuse that I have seen, honestly, that I've seen women heap on in the name of being the mother of a child just about trumps anything I've ever seen before.
Well, it's that if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy attitude, right? And they seem to believe that just because they gave birth, you know, something she could have done had I not been a responsible pet owner, means that they can do no wrong, that they are always right, that they are owed special privileges, special deference, reverence, money in many cases. I mean, I have clients who are still paying alimony even though their children are no longer eligible for child support. I mean, that's messed up. That's messed up. You shouldn't have to pay adult support.
I don't want to derail the conversation, but I will point out that at least in Great Britain that seems to be facing an end recently. Peter Lloyd, the author of Stand By Your Manhood, was on a radio show. What's that, T?
That's a great book. I'm almost done with it. I would love to have him as a guest.
Yep. He is a great interview and a very, very good writer, particularly with these issues. But he appeared on a BBC program, radio, yesterday or the day before, I think. Two courts have now ruled that women in Great Britain cannot, count on the fact that they're going to be supported for the rest of their lives. But I was dancing in my living room and was like, oh man, finally some sanity in the world. But here still in America.
This is Great Britain.
Yes, I never thought I'd say I'm going to move to England, but I might. Well, since I won't get married, I won't have to worry about it. But the other side of that is that this was received by the woman that was on this program advocating to not essentially fix this problem. The entitlement in her speech was just, she was actually talking about equality, that we're supposed to have an equal world, so that means you have to take care of my lazy ass for the rest of my freaking life because I don't want to work. And she said, we need to do this in the name of equality.
Give her the Irony Award.
Well, apparently even a change ruling by some judges in England doesn't change the fact that borderlines live there too. And sometimes they get on the radio, as was the case with this one. But that was actually phenomenal. The level of hypocrisy in that of demanding equality or demanding free support from somebody you don't even know and haven't known in years for the rest of your life simply because you spread your legs.
Well, it's what I find so disgusting is that many of the women who behave this way, who have these attitudes, hold their exes who are subsidizing their choice to be unemployed or underemployed in utter contempt and open hatred for them, yet they're collecting money from them. To me, that just reeks of a lack of integrity. At least be grateful. At least be grateful. If somebody is supporting you, your choice to not be a self-sufficient adult, don't be a hateful jerk about it. Be grateful every single day. But they don't. Many aren't. You know, and what's more is they take the support while they engage in parental alienation and teach the children to hate and disrespect their fathers.
With all respect, from the other side of the gender fence here, Dr. T, I got to say, I don't give a fudgesicle if they're grateful or not. I don't want their gratitude. I don't care about their gratitude. Get off your lazy ass and get a job. And shut up.
I agree with you as well, but until the legislature changes.
Yep. At least they could show some gratitude for the rigged system. I agree with that. So now we've got victim identity and we've got entitlement, which I think we've covered a little bit of. I don't think these are strange topics to a lot of our audience. But what comes up next? What is the third of these four tragic horses?
The Fearsome Foursome. We're not talking about apocalypse tonight.
We might be if we marry the wrong person.
This is true. Control freakery, right? Because if you're a victim or want to be perceived as a victim and you're entitled and believe you're the specialist snowflake, whoever snowflaked, are entitled to all of these goodies, well, you need to be able to control people's reality so that they buy into that.
You know, that could go on a sort of almost a micro level too. And I don't mind sharing this out of a past relationship. That one of the issues that cropped up, and this is pre-red pill days for me, was what I got a lot in that relationship was, you know, would you do the dishes? Okay, well, would you do the dishes the way I want them done? And I mean, even on that level of behavior, of wanting things done, but only want them done their way. Is it fair to call that a red flag?
If somebody were willing to do the dishes for me, they could do it in their boxer shorts, singing "Hippity Doodah." I wouldn't care. I would just be grateful they were getting done. You can load that dishwasher however you want. Just load it. No, but I would say.
I would say, needless to say, that was not a long-term relationship.
Good. Now I have a great mental image in my head. Never mind. But I would say so. Yeah, absolutely. It's wanting to control something right down to whether or not saucers go in front of bowls. Who cares? Who cares?
Well, and you know, a lot of men identify with this. They do, and I'm sure that there's women that identify with it too. I'm not discounting that, but I talk about these issues more from a man's perspective and experience with women. It's not meant to offend the women who aren't like that. But I will say that, you know, a common shared experience of a lot of men in a lot of relationships, I'm not talking about a small percentage of them. I'm talking about an unfortunate majority of the time, is that men experience control on that level in modern relationships. They are told, you know, I don't like this guy, he drinks too much, don't hang out with him, what do you dress that way for, do it this way, I thought I asked you to put the lid down. That stuff is a constant echo chamber in their lives of instruction and how to live, how to dress, how to act, what to do. And that is, I tell you, for guys with boundaries, that gets very old very fast.
It reminds me of that great scene from About Schmidt. Did you see that with Jack Nicholson?
I sure did. I thought it was a great movie.
Where after his wife dies, his wife was such a control freak that she required him to sit down while peeing, urinating. And after she died, he discovered a box of letters. She had an affair with a coworker or a friend anyway, and so then he finally, even after death, even after she died, he was still peeing sitting down, but after he realized that she was like an unfaithful hypocrite, he had this great moment where he just stood up and he whizzed all over his bathroom.
I'm familiar with that scene. I know that feeling.
I'm not encouraging anyone to do that because then you're going to have to clean it up. That's not so much fun. But what we're talking about is somebody who is controlled right down to how he could engage in his own bodily functions. I mean, I have worked with men whose wives freak out and become angry if they masturbate for 10 minutes in the shower and believe that they have a sex addiction because, and I'm not talking, they aren't like masturbating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you know, maybe a few times a week on their own, and these women see that as, well, you must not really love me if you need to masturbate, and it's I mean, guys, if that's what's going on in your relationship, that is crazy, and that is beyond controlling. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being in charge of your own bodily functions. And if you are with a woman who is trying to control how you go to the bathroom, whether or not you get to enjoy 10 minutes of peace or in the shower by yourself in the morning, that's some serious control freakery right there.
Yeah, you don't even have to hide in the shower, guys. That is control freakery.
I even have an autonomous 10 minutes of pleasure on his own terms, right? These are the women who don't want you to have a good time unless she says so.
I remember having a conversation with a woman some years ago that was along the lines that porn was cheating, and that any man that looked in porn was being unfaithful to his wife. And I asked her, I said, let me ask you something. And do you have a vibrator near your bed? And the look on her face said it all.
Yep.
It was totally busted right there, right?
Well, the question today would be, do you watch reality TV? Because in my opinion, reality television, particularly the Real Housewives shows, etc., are porno for the personality disordered.
Yes, they are. They are by the personality disordered for the personality disordered. But, I mean, this whole notion of controlling men's sexuality, controlling their friendships, their exposure to the outside world.
Women who probably have like a dog-eared copy of 50 Shades of Grey, for God's sakes.
We're renaming that 50 Shades of Sage in honor of GQ. So what is the borderlines or the person? I know you said we're including narcissists and the whole spectrum there of personality disorders in this group. What is the payoff for them in the control? What do they get out of this much control over somebody?
Well, if they can have that kind of control, it helps them to stave off what we discussed last week, which are the fears that drive them, the fear of abandonment, the fear of feeling inferior or inadequate, the fear of loss of resources, the fear of public exposure. So if they can control you, it gives them a sense of control over their own lives and their own sense of personal security. Of course, this is a vicious cycle because you can't truly control another person, maybe a small child. But eventually, any adult with an ounce of self-respect is going to start to bridle at that level of control. And then the more you bridle, the more they push for control. And then what ends up happening is the more they try to control others, the more out of control they become themselves.
And isn't it also true that even if they get close to absolute control over somebody, that there is a sense of emptiness in that and ultimate lack of return, that they're eventually going to take their rage about that out on whoever they're controlling? Because number one, you can't respect somebody that you're controlling that way.
You can't respect a doormat. So even if you give them what they want, which is total control, and you become a submissive doormat, well, that's ultimately no fun, because the fun is in the struggle. The fun is in the winning, the vanquishing, the getting you to do something that you don't want to do, getting you to operate outside of your own best interests and emotional health. That's the thrill for them. And once they accomplish that, it's like you're no longer the half-dead mouse. You're the dead mouse.
Yep. That's where it leads, guys. I mean, You can think that if I just give her enough control, if I just do what she says enough, that she's going to be pleased and she'll get off my back. You're out of your mind to even entertain that idea for a minute. That is only going to make it worse.
And
go ahead.
A lot of guys, you know, that I work with too, will be like, well, I'm going to start, if I had just had better boundaries in the beginning and not fallen for her shit tests, so maybe if I do, it's like, well, no. No, if you'd done that from the beginning, you wouldn't be where you are today. She wouldn't be with you and a good wife or a good girlfriend. She just would have moved on to somebody who would put up with her nonsense. Because having healthy boundaries, as Paul and I have said many, many times, is the best. It's like wearing a garlic necklace.
And let's talk about shit tests for a moment, because there's going to be some people out there that are not familiar with that expression. And where it comes from is basically the game community. And no, we're not going to get into that discussion, thank God. But what it is just a term used, primarily the intention behind it is when men in relationships, or when they're connecting with a woman, meeting her initially, or when they're dealing with the relationship down the road, that the woman issues shit tests. She puts obstacles out there that the man must prove his faithfulness and his worthiness by passing the shit test, which means finding a way ultimately to give compliance with what they want, almost like in the beginning, like you're in a job interview, that she's going to say things designed to trigger the anger or rejection of any normal person with healthy boundaries. And if that does trigger your reaction, then you have failed the shit test. And my contention is that you are supposed to be absolutely obsessive about failing every shit test that comes your way. Even if it's a reasonable shit test, if you know it's a shit test, fail it every time. Intend to fail it, and fail it with some color. Fail it with a little bit of brio and a little bit of pageantry. Doesn't hurt anybody. Make it a show of rejecting the shit test, so that it ends up in a shit pile that is literally covering her and not you. Because the moment you get into this game of trying to pass shit tests with people, you've entered a fake relationship. You might as well accept it. All right, if you're just trying to get laid, go for it, guys. I'm not arguing that point with you. Have fun selling yourself out to get your Twinkie wet. But when it comes to relationships, you are selling yourself out completely, passing shit tests. You don't have a real relationship. What you have is that you're a little puppet on a string, and when mama says jump, you're going to jump. That's what it really boils down to. And I don't care who doesn't like it. That's right. So, I mean, am I off base there, Dr. T? Because I've been a proud flunky of shit tests for about, 15 years now.
Well, that's wonderful. And
I like it.
I hope more men and women, because there are men who do the same thing. You know, personality disorders are not exclusive to the female gender.
This is true.
I have passed shit tests in my previous relationships. I have, and we'll get into this. I'm going to wait for where I was headed with this when we go into the fourth of the Fearsome Foursome. But, you know, if you have self-respect, healthy self-respect, and live by the golden rule, which is you treat others the way you want to be treated, then don't buy into that crazy dance. It's not worth it in the end, because it takes a heck of a lot longer to rebuild your sense of self-respect and self-esteem than it does to allow one of these individuals to take it from you.
And I'm going to say it again, I don't care, just doesn't matter, because I know it's true, is that if you are willing to sell yourself out just to stick your dick in a psycho POS, as though that is some sort of accomplishment or satisfaction in life, I'm going to say you got some really, really easy standards for satisfaction. I got to admit, guys like that, I envy you. If I could feel satisfied in life with that kind of success, man, things would be simpler. They really would be, because that sort of thing is not hard to do. If you don't have a soul, don't have a conscience, don't have any self-respect, don't care about anything except about getting laid, then that is, shoot, that would be wonderful.
But you know what, Paul? Those aren't the guys who end up emotionally shredded and gutted. You know, and in fact, I say those types of individuals are the ones who are best suited for other narcissists and borderlines. Let them cannibalize one another. But if you are not just looking to get laid or for a conquest or a thrill bang or whatever you want to call it, choose someone healthier. Choose somebody who is actually capable of love and mutuality and reciprocity.
Let me say this too, and I do think it's important. Shit tests are not just a personality disorder thing at all. It's human characteristics that happen between people. And yes, given the sexual dynamics we have of the times and of modern human history, it's probably more likely that shit tests are issued by women and that there's an attempt to be accepted or whatever on the part of men in dealing with them. The individual issuing a shit test doesn't qualify themselves as a personality disorder for issuing one. Where you get into finding out where the rubber meets the road is in how they react to your rejection of a shit test. Because some people just need to meet somebody that says, you know what, I don't do that shit. And they and that will intrigue some people that are open to learning.
And I think the non-personality disordered individuals, when you say no, they respect you more. And so that can actually be the foundation of a good relationship.
Yes, it can.
When I was in my youth, I think I probably threw out some shit tests. And you know what? The guys who didn't put up with that, I was like, okay, I can work with this. I can respect this person. Because somebody who was just going to roll over.
I got news for you, Dr. T. You're still in your youth.
Okay.
You definitely are, and that's a good thing.
But you know what, guys? If you want a healthy woman to respect you, don't be a doormat. It doesn't mean don't be kind. It doesn't mean don't be a decent human being. It doesn't mean be an a-hole. But don't put up with other people's crap.
And, you know, I think this is probably one of the hardest lessons to teach men, because the way men are raised is they sort of get thrown into the social environment and told, figure it out, where it comes to women and things like that. They don't really have anybody. Most men don't have any adult males sitting them down and talking to them. They tell them don't get somebody pregnant or something like that, but when it comes down to the interpersonal relations between men and women, men don't have mentors that sit them down and ever say, if they hear anything, it's going to be like, well, here's what you got to do to please her. Because unfortunately, most men are that way. So it is really hard when you tell guys, look, don't try to pass any shit tests from a woman. Some guys will read that as be a dick. And it's not the same thing at all. It's two totally different things. Refusing to surrender your self-respect doesn't mean you've got to be a jerk-off with the opposite sex. What it means is that you have a set of values and you have your belief about what you deserve from other people that's hopefully solid, and that you just don't tolerate otherwise. It isn't something, you don't have to build a brick wall and put on boxing gloves in order to have boundaries. But a lot of times, because guys never get the message growing up about, you know, well, what about you before you start thinking about what about her? No man, or as I say on the internet, as no man ever heard in his life. It is tough to get that message across, but it's important to get the message across too, because in the end, whether you're gamer, PUA, all you guys out there, MRA, whatever, most human beings want to pair bond. You don't have to like it, but you're going to have to live with it. That's what most human beings want to do in the end. The idea of lifetime bachelorhood works for some men. It really does, and it's a very positive thing. But most men will not want lifetime bachelorhood. They will want to connect with somebody. They will want to not feel like they're going to grow old alone. I mean, I'm one of those guys. I just don't want to do that. I'd rather have a partner there, and I'm happy with that to do it.
Dishwasher.
What's that?
Somebody to load that dishwasher.
That's right, and I get it right every time, too. I say, did I put this glass too far to the left to please you? No, I actually don't do that. Hard to believe, huh? But most guys are going to want relationships. Most men are, and it's normal, it's healthy. That's part of the human experience. Don't let anybody else lie to you and tell you otherwise. There's nothing wrong with you if you want a relationship. But if you want a relationship at any and all cost, including your self-respect, then there is a problem. And with that, I suppose we can go on to the final of the four, what we call the fearsome foursome. What's the final of the fearsome foursome, Dr. T?
Emotional reasoning.
Emotional reasoning. Well, your dog doesn't look particularly emotional right now, but it's actually a very cute dog. Emotional reasoning. Oh, my God. The most frustrating thing in the world to deal with. Why don't you explain what emotional reasoning really is?
It is the bane of my existence.
Yep.
I can explain more. I believe the world is divided between introverts and extroverts, and emotional reasoners and critical thinkers. Emotional reasoning, well, there's emotional intelligence, and having emotional intelligence is a very good thing, but not when you allow it to make critical decisions in your life. Emotional reasoners will believe what feels good over what is true, especially if what is true does not feel good, makes them feel bad about themselves. They force fit facts to fit their feelings. And oftentimes, especially if you're a critical reasoner, the more evidence you present, the more logical you are, the more emotionally out of control the emotional reasoner will become. Kind of like little kids going, la, 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 I can't hear you, I can't hear you, stomping their feet, and then, you know, tantrums occur.
And I think it's, again, I'll get probably shot at for this, I don't care. There is, I bet you, a lot of the more minor, but I mean, who's to say what's minor when it comes to domestic violence? That a lot of the domestic violence that happens is people that are just up to here with emotional reasoning and snap one day in the course, not to defend what they're doing at all, but it is what happens. You get somebody that, like an emotional reasoner, if you're trying to solve a problem with an emotional reasoner, first of all, don't do that. Emotional reasoners do not solve problems. They create problems. They make problems have puppies, but they don't solve problems. What they do is if they run into a wall of your logic where they cannot reconcile the fantasy they've created in their head, they will simply shape-shift and move over to another place and go at you from another direction without recognizing that their argument has just been discounted logically, and that they are in fact acting irrationally, and they will move around from place to place to place, but you will never pin. It's like trying to nail Jello to a tree. It's not going to happen. You'll never get them.
That carnival game, Whack-A-Mole.
Yes, exactly. And that's what emotional reasoners do. So they essentially, in relationships, they rob any possibility. See, here's part of the deal in relationships, is that a lot of times intimacy is built on conflict. that if there's conflict and you eventually work through a problem and you learn to hear each other, you build intimacy in a relationship. Same thing happens in friendships, and it can happen at work with other people, that you can have conflict and you eventually both come around to a more reasonable position and you try to negotiate with each other for solutions. You get closer to people that way. Emotional reasoners never get close to people. They can't. They're totally incapable of it because they don't know how to connect with somebody enough to respect that there's two sides to the story, that there is probably some compromise needed on both ends in order to solve problems. But what they do is they just go into the unreasonable mode, which is their emotions, and I feel like you were attacking me. Doesn't matter whether you were really attacking. I feel like you were attacking me. I feel like you said this. Well, I didn't say that, but I felt like you did. And so, therefore you did. It's crazy, I know, but this happens to people every day all across the world, and there's millions of people out there right now sitting in homes with relationships with emotional reasoners that will, for the rest of their lives, try to make sense to somebody who doesn't care anything about making sense whatsoever. The only thing they care about is winning.
Well, or winning, in what that means is getting you to buy in to their distortions, their delusions, and their emotionally clouded world. And I think what it comes down to is if you're not an emotional reasoner and you actually want to resolve conflict in a healthy way, and you can't do that with the emotional reasoners because, again, if it doesn't feel good for them, then it means it's wrong. It destroys trust, and you can't have intimacy without trust. Because if I can't trust that at some point you're going to come back to objective reality so that we can work things out, then it's just going to be one series of unresolved conflicts after the next, which then build upon one another. And as I mentioned, that game of whack-a-mole, when you're dealing with someone like this, as you get to the heart of the issue, which is, oftentimes something that they've done or said that is incredibly hurtful or disrespectful or underhanded or a gross betrayal, they bring up one of those old unresolved conflicts and why it was your fault. And so then you get distracted from the original, the conflict of the day, and you go back to a conflict that happened 3 months ago, 3 years ago, 30 years ago, and it just never ends. And you're like a dog who is trying to chase its own tail just to get to a place of resolution, and you're just going around and around and around in circles. And what happens with a lot of the folks I work with is they have a conflict. Their partner engages in some crazy emotional reasoning, and then the next day or the next hour after the dust settles, the emotional reasoner wants to pretend like nothing ever happened. And if you try to bring it up and say, okay, well, you seem calmer now, sweetie. Can we talk about, because that really hurt my feelings when you said X, Y, Z, when you did this. And all that you typically will do is just start the crazy again.
It'll go right back to where it was. Exactly, yep. With no...
Once they're feeling better, you should feel better, right? It's like, when you need to throw up and you can feel the bile rising, and then you throw up and you feel better. Well, that's what emotional reasoners do with their emotions. So they spray you in their emotional vomit. They feel better because they got it out of their system, and because they feel better, then you should feel better too, even though you're standing there dripping in their emotional vomit. Sorry for the...
It does not get any clearer than that. Matter of fact, that was so well done, Dr. T, I need a handkerchief.
Knock it off.
Yeah. You know what? I think the crisis, too, with emotional reasoners, and it goes back to all the other three horses, too, is that we're talking about people with absolutely no moral compass. No. An emotional reasoner will see that you're literally bleeding trying to fix a problem, right? That it's really important to you to solve a problem and to find a sense of peace that you can live with in a relationship, But an emotional reasoner will look at that and will still lie. And by lying, I mean when you won't answer honest questions in trying to sort something out, when you avoid honest questions, you're being dishonest. And they will do that. They will watch you literally scratching and clawing, trying to find a solution, trying to find a connection and some peace, and they will crap on all that and then turn around and say, what's your problem? What is it you think I did? Why are you so upset?
Well, that's gaslighting, which is a form of emotional and psychological abuse.
Yes, it is. It is a chronic, constant, ongoing form of abuse that never gets recognized. I mean, when somebody has had enough of that and they reach out and slap somebody, then, well, if they happen to be the male, well, then, yeah, people are paying attention. The SWAT team will be paying attention. The half of the city police department will be paying attention, and your cellmates will be paying attention to you. But the fact of the matter is that there is an awful lot of abuse that leads up to those moments that never gets recognized and never gets talked about by anybody. And it's a crying shame, because if we could openly discuss what's happening here, we could actually address a lot of domestic violence and stop it from happening.
That's right. Because, as I mentioned earlier, abusers of both genders. This applies to male abusers and female abusers. And emotional reasoning, to me, I see that as sort of the fuel that runs the whole crazy train. And, you know, a person can have one of these fearsome foursome, and you can manage it, you can deal with it, but when you have all four of them present in one delightful human being,
yes,
forget it. Just forget it, because they're self-reinforcing.
Yes, and if you're sitting out there saying, oh no, my cupcake would never do that, you're probably the one with the problem, because Cupcake will do that and does. So let's recap them again, Dr. T, before we close out tonight. What is the fearsome foursome for individuals of either sex to look out for when they're making and maintaining relationships, when it comes to being the key factors in identifying whether or not they're dealing with somebody who might be personality disordered?
Sure. Victim identity. You know, if he or she wants to tell you about all of the bad things that have happened and all of the childhood sexual abuse and domestic violence that they've experienced within the first 5 minutes of your first date, they're looking for sympathy, they're looking for pity. Jeez. Sorry about that.
You still have a landline?
See, I am old.
Okay. So, as you were saying,
person went away. See, if you don't answer, eventually they'll leave you alone. No contact. It works. So it's victim identity, entitlement, control freakery, and emotional reasoning.
And I've got a news for you. If you've already confirmed, 100% confirmed emotional reasoning, you don't need to look for the others. They're there. If you've got an emotional reasoner, you have a disaster of a relationship.
A foothold in reality really is a relationship must. It just is. Otherwise, you're building a house on quicksand. And, you know, I don't do construction, but I'm pretty sure that that's not sound.
And it will, one of the things we like to point out here for guys that are struggling with this stuff right now, there's always go to shrink4men.com, just like it says on Tara's lower third. She has, for fee services, coaching men through these problems, and but you can avoid. I'm going to try to undermine Dr. T's business here. I want to put her out of work. You don't need Dr. T.
That's going to happen.
That's right. You won't need Dr. T.
I would love to retire to somewhere, you know, and live in a nice little yurt or grass hut or something with Wi-Fi and indoor plumbing.
So just remember, help Dr. T retire. Just don't get yourself hooked up with in any permanent way or even temporary way with crazy. Once you know it's crazy, go away. And then you won't have to pay Dr. T her rate, and you won't have to pay lawyers, and you won't have to give up that house you bought, and all other kinds of really nifty sort of benefits that if you will pay attention before you invite insanity into your life, you will find is a lot more cost effective. And then what you can do, because if there's only two ways to see Dr. T. That is one, through her services, where you can see Dr. T, but also you can also see her in person at the second international, was that slick or what? The second international conference on men's issues coming up in Houston on October 29th, 30th, and 31st, where Dr. T will be the MC and she will be speaking. She has taken on double duty for the conference, and we're grateful for that. You'll be able to see her live there, and tickets for that go on sale April 2nd, so don't be square, be there. Also, did I mention that we have written a book?
I'm sorry, I was going to say, and if I can find a blacksmith, I may very well dress as a Valkyrie for Halloween, which is the Saturday of the conference. So if I can get a metal breastplate made, it's happening.
Any of you metal breastplate makers out there, please contact Tara through her site. Don't write me. I can't play middleman for breastplate makers. I'm sorry. That's just one of my boundaries in life.
Boundary.
But also, I don't know if I've mentioned, but we have written a book, and it is far less expensive than individual counseling services, and if you apply the principles that are written in that book, I think they will be just about as helpful. Certainly, if you practice this preemptively, it will be much more helpful. But there is a link in the low bar where you can go in and pre-order that book now. It is, we launched the pre-orders on February 14th. Valentine's Day seems such a great day, and we're doing the official release on Mother's Day, May 10th. Another great, Hail the Golden Uterus. But you can go in and pre-order now, and your book from Amazon will be auto-delivered as soon as it is released on May 10th, and I think you'll find it enjoyable reading. Please go in, support us with this work, and go in there and get a copy of that right now, and get 10 more copies for everybody in the world that needs them, which is a lot of people. But anything else before we close, Dr. T?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, it's been fun, and we will be back. I don't know, we've somehow managed to migrate this program to Thursdays without ever even discussing it with each other. It just happened. But we'll be back next week for sure. It'll either be on Tuesday or Thursday, depending, and I have no idea what we're going to talk about, but it's going to be fun. And with that, I will just say good night to everybody. Have a great one, and remember, don't stick your dick in crazy.